Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of Hear Her Roar. Where today's episode is going to be a very special one today, as we have a very special guest with us today, but we are coming to you live from the Mic'd Up Studios in Parramatta. And once again, I'm joined by Rach. Afternoon, Rach.
Afternoon, Kel. Afternoon, Marina.
Yeah, as I said, today we have a very special guest joining us today. One of the most highly respected media executives, in my personal opinion, and the first and still the only female chair of the West Tigers. We have Marina Go joining us today. So welcome to the podcast, Marina. We're very excited to have you today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be here.
So Marina, I was trying to work out today when we actually met. I think it has to be at least 2015, the first time we met, because after we met, not long after we met, you actually came and spoke at the school that I was teaching at the time, which was an all-girls school, and you spoke to the girls about being a female in a male-dominated workforce. And I know I wasn't actually there that day of all days. I had something else that I needed to go to, but I remember the girls coming back to me afterwards saying that they were so impressed with what you had to say, and they were so inspired by the way that you spoke to the girls as well. So for anybody that doesn't know, Marina, as I said, you are a highly respected media executive. You were the first and still the only female chair of the West Tigers. And during your tenure, you helped to guide the club through quite a significant period, helping to strengthen the governance and overall the long-term direction of the club. Mm-hmm. You finished up with the club in 2019, and since then you've been a member of a huge range of different boards across a range of different industries. So Rachel and I are really excited to have you here today because we want to hear about your journey through not just rugby league, but leadership in general, your story, where you came from, and what you learnt from being around rugby league as a female as well. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, I'm really excited that the two of you are doing this. I think that we need more female voices, and particularly in sport and in the sport of rugby league. So well done to the two of you, and I'm delighted to be your first. Am I your first guest?
That is right. Yes,
yep,
well,
first guest.
It's only our second episode, so you are correct. You are our first guest. I was talking to Josh, who you were Josh's first guest as well.
Yeah.
We work really closely with Josh under the West Tigers TV banner. So it's like full circle that we get to have you on our show as well as our first guest. So as I sort of mentioned, you've built an extraordinary leadership career across media and sport. Where did your leadership journey actually start, and what were the early influences or moments that shaped your career to date?
Well, actually, I had the opportunity to lead at quite a young age, relatively speaking. I was 23 when I became the editor of a magazine. That magazine was Dolly Magazine, so some of you may remember it.
Yes.
Younger listeners won't remember it. But from the age when I was a teenager, I read Dolly Magazine, like a lot of teenage girls back then, and I just really wanted to be the editor of that magazine, and I didn't know what was involved other than that I had to be a journalist, and so that's why I became a journalist, actually, because I wanted to be the editor of Dolly Magazine. And just through just luck, I guess, I was in the right place at the right time. I was offered the opportunity to become the editor, and I had never led a team before. I mean, that was literally my first. I was straight into a leadership role, and I was leading a team of people and a vision for a magazine quite naively. It was probably lucky that I was 23 because you don't know what you don't know at 23. So you kind of go for it.
Apart from what you've read in Dolly.
Apart from what I read and apart from what I believed I thought should be in the magazine based on what I loved as a reader. Yeah. And I kind of learnt on the job. I had obviously people that I reported to, so I reported through to a publisher. So I had good people that were a lot older than me that helped me think through leadership. But I was quite young when I started, and then of course after that, once you lead a team, you don't ever not want to lead a team if you enjoy it, and I really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Media is a fast-moving and high-pressure industry. Yes. What lessons from that environment still shape you and how you approach leadership roles now?
So, yeah, look, the interesting thing about media and the reason why, I have been in a lot of high pressure, highly turbulent environments, not the least of which is sport, and I know we'll get to that, and have been able to not only retain my sanity but come out the other side so far with my reputation intact, is because it was always like that. So media was always in flux. Media was always disrupted. During my time anyway, it was always going through significant change. And so I had to learn to adapt, and it was almost adapt or die from people talk about companies, but I saw my career like that. Either I adapt to the new media environment or I die. So I went into digital media really quickly, knowing that was the way to go. So I feel like it's made me resilient.
Yep.
And in many ways, that's probably the greatest lesson, but also to be able to step back and to say, okay, the environment is fast moving. There's chaos everywhere, and there was always chaos everywhere. But I don't have to be chaotic in the chaos. I can step back and I can reflect and I can have a pause before I think about what to do next. And so I find that I'm quite reflective in my response. So I can make decisions really quickly because I've always had to, and I'm really decisive. But I will also step back and almost look at it from a helicopter point of view and make sure that I understand the full context. So I think that's what media has taught me.
I think I'd need a few lessons in that. I think that's one thing I definitely, I'm in my first real sort of leadership role at the moment. I've led projects, I've led a lot of things like that. But it's the first role where I'm sort of more leading people as well now. And yeah, I definitely might need to hit you up for some tips and tricks on that one by the sounds of it.
More than happy to.
Decision making is not my forte. Just ask my husband every night. It's like the hardest decision in our house is what's for dinner. Can't even decide.
Well, what you do is you do what I do. I've got a husband who cooks.
Oh.
So I go, what's for dinner? And it's his decision.
Ooh, speaking of, sorry about that.
I thought you were going to say that's your husband telling you what's for dinner.
No. That we do have a joke in our house that the first person who asks what's for dinner doesn't have to make the decision. So it's literally before we say good morning to each other, that's the first question is what's for tea?
And that's the beauty about living alone. Being single, I don't have to worry about anyone's concerns.
Well, 5 nights out of the week he's usually working night shift, so I don't have to worry about it. But then I have to decide what I want for dinner, which is just as bad. But before rugby league, you were involved in Netball Australia. So you had a governance role with Netball Australia. What drew you into that space? And what did it teach you about national sporting organisations and how they succeed or struggle?
Yeah, so the netball opportunity was, again, I think lucky, random really. I had decided, so I was working as an executive in media, and I had decided that I needed to think about a future board career one day because I was hearing that there were not enough women on boards and that in order to change the fortunes for and opportunities for women, you needed more women on boards. And so I just thought, well, I'm going to have to be one of those women. That's what I'm going to have to do. So I took myself off and did the Australian Institute of Company Directors course so that I could understand that. And then somebody said to me, well, after that you should register with an organisation called Women on Boards. So I did that, put my details in, and then about, I think it was maybe less than 3 months later, I got a call from Netball Australia. So they were looking for their first independent director, and they wanted somebody that had a media background. So there I was, right person, right time, on the list, and I thought this will be a great opportunity for me to learn about governance because it was really my first board. So they wanted me, I wanted to do it, off I went. And I did my 3 terms of 2 years, so 6 years in total. And I learnt so much about governance. It was a really well-governed organisation, a board of all women. Every now and then we had a man, but it was mainly women. And, they just were really, really good at knowing exactly what the sport needed and how to achieve it. And they were financially very astute. So the organisation didn't have as much revenue coming in, of course, to that sport as we see with rugby league. But they were very, very good at living within their means and putting on, good competitions with that. So I learnt a lot about what's important, I guess, in governing organisations, how to manage risk, how to think about costs. But again, it taught me a lot about sport. So bizarrely, as a result of doing 6 years on the board of Netball Australia, I then was considered a sports governance expert, which is why the NRL came knocking,
Right.
because there were not that many women on sports boards back in the early. I'm just trying to think what year it was. It was early 2000s.
Wow.
There were hardly any women on sports boards. There's still hardly any women on sports boards, but there were fewer then.
Mm-hmm.
So,
You were saying that your goal was to get yourself onto a board.
Yes.
Doing a little bit of research for the pod. How many do you think you've now been a part of? How many boards have you sat on?
Wow, that's a really good question. I would say probably. So, I'm currently on about 5, and then there's an advisory board. And then prior to my current group, I had it's probably another 6, so that's 11. Wow. And then before that, I did a lot of not-for-profits and sports boards, which I would say would be another half a dozen. So I think we're somewhere between 15 and 20 boards, probably.
That's impressive. Yeah, very impressive.
Yes. Thank you. It's been a lot of work, but I really enjoy it.
And such a diverse range as well.
Yes.
So you haven't sort of pigeonholed yourself as this board. You've really diversified that, which I think is really incredible.
Yes. Well, one of the things that, because, people say that to me, and I look at my group of boards and I think, okay, well, the kind of lens through which I look at all of this is 2 things mainly, kind of customer. Yeah. So, with media, we had a direct relationship with the reader, and most organisations have a customer they need a direct relationship with. And so that is one of the reasons that they look to me. Mm-hmm. Social licence. So I care very deeply about impact on community, on people, diversity, and opportunity is really important to me. But I also chair the people and culture committees, or people rem and culture committees for most of my boards. Right. And so that's been another kind of area of skill set that I've built up along the way that applies. But probably maybe more interesting for you and your audience is that I actually credit my professional board career, so my paid board career, to the West Tigers. So prior to the West Tigers, I was primarily on not-for-profits, and I wasn't paid for all of that time on the West Tigers and all of the public suffering and everything that I went through. I wasn't paid to do that. Right. A lot of the not-for-profit boards, I chaired Ovarian Cancer Australia. That you don't get paid to do that. Mm-hmm. And it was really when an ASX company chairman was following the fortunes of the West Tigers and, my kind of public flogging through one part of the media. But while all of that was going on, the AFR was writing business stories about the recovery of the West Tigers, because actually that's the story. And it caught the attention of a particular chairman. And he then became my mentor, and he is the person that I credit for getting me my first paid board role, because he was recommending me to everyone. And he said to me, it's the resilience that you showed through that West Tigers
if you could deal with that
time. If you could deal with that, you can deal with everything. And, boards can be rocky. Mm-hmm. There can be challenging stakeholders. There can be challenging, sector could be structurally challenged. You go through a lot of different things, and you need to be resilient enough to last the course when those things are happening. And so, I actually credit my board career to the West Tigers.
Wow. That's great. That's so great to hear. And that actually leads into the next part of our interview.
Question.
So before we do that, there was a quote that I read in heard over in one of your media releases from about 4 years ago. And it's all about women empowerment. Mm-hmm. If someone offers you an opportunity you've never received before, you need to take it, but not just for yourself, but for other women.
Yes.
And I think that really resonates with Kelly and myself and the platform that we're trying to start up here. Mm-hmm. So how did you start with your role at the West Tigers? What were the steps that took? And
Yes. So, and that's exactly it. That's the best quote of all. that I'll talk to you about with regards to how I made the decision to say yes to chairing the West Tigers. So the way that it came about was, I think as I'd said, I stepped off. My terms were finished at Netball Australia, and I wasn't thinking about sport. I was just in my day job as an executive in a media company, and I got a call from the NRL, and it was Dave Smith was the CEO at the time. Mm-hmm. Those of you recall Dave Smith when he was the CEO of the NRL. And his assistant phoned and said, we'd really like to talk to you about an opportunity on a board of a club. And I didn't say they didn't tell me which club. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, my husband was there when I was on the call. I hung up and he said to me, well, it better not be anything other than the West Tigers, because he is a mad – my husband – is related to Neil Pringle, his cousin of Neil Pringle. So he's a mad West Tigers fan back from the Balmain day. It's in the blood. And, of course, Lockie, our son is as well, completely obsessed with the West Tigers. So I didn't know which club it was. And I said to my husband, well, I'm going to go along and I'll find out. And I don't know. So, and my older son, unfortunately, he's the dark horse. He's he likes all the black sheep, I should say, not the dark horse. He's the black sheep. He goes for the Roosters, unfortunately.
Of all clubs, honestly.
Yes. We couldn't get that out of him. We tried. He had he said Balmain jerseys and West Tigers since he was little, but anyway. So he was saying to me, well, it can't be Souths. It can't be, all of the, Book of Feuds were coming out. I was like, so I go along for the interview not knowing which club. And they wanted to interview me because they said, you're a sports governance expert. And when I get there, it's the West Tigers. And so I'm sitting there through the interview and, Simon Cook was there and, others. And I came out and I rang my husband and I said, guess which club it is? And he said to me, oh, my God, you're going to tell me it's, mentioned some club that the West Tigers hates. Yeah. And I said, no, it's West Tigers. He went, oh, my God, you have to do it. Like it's won the lotto. You have to do it. And I said, well, I don't know if they want me yet, quite frankly. Let's see. A week later I got a call and they said, we'd really like you to join the board. So they were at the time looking for 3 independent directors. They had hoped to select 1 female. But thankfully for us, there were 2 women and 1 man selected, which was really great, and that just shows it was all on merit because they were not asked to choose 2 women; they were only asked to choose 1, and they selected 2. So we were pretty pleased with that. And so anyway, we go along to our first board meeting, and the board then becomes a new board. So there were 2 from Balmain, 2 from West, and then 3 independent directors. Mm-hmm. And the chair had to be an independent chair. So that was one of the requirements that the NRL had asked for. And I think I was the one that didn't want to be the chair. I was not jockeying for it. I think that, Rosemary and Lucio, they'd had experience being a chair, and I think they would have liked to have been the chair. For whatever reason, I think it's because I have a media background. And the shareholders knew what was coming. They knew that whoever stepped into the chair would be on the back page, on the front page, whatever. It would be ugly. Mm-hmm. And I suspect they knew that I could deal with that because I'd been in the media. So at that meeting, they said, we'd like you to be the chair. And my instinct was no. And then I thought about what I say to all women, and that is if you get an opportunity to do something that no woman has done before you, you have to say yes. Otherwise, you're letting the sisterhood down, right?
Yep, 100%.
You've got to pave the way. So very reluctantly I said yes. And then my life changed for 5 years.
Didn't it just?
So it was a really by chance kind of thing. Yep. I wasn't looking for it. I certainly didn't go looking to be chair. But I don't regret it. And, I loved it more than I didn't love it, mainly because of people like you actually. Yeah.
We loved having you in the seat. That's definitely for sure.
Thank you.
So when you first took the role, like you mentioned yourself that the stakeholders, the people that were already on the board knew that there was going to be a pretty turbulent time ahead.
Yeah.
What did you see as the most important priority for the club? And what would the normal everyday fan that just follows the team, goes to the games, not understand about what a role like being the chair of the West Tigers requires?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question. So part of the reason that the club was looking for 3 new directors and independent directors, and part of the reason the NRL was involved, because usually the NRL is not involved, it's up to the club to select their own board, was because the West Tigers was basically financially on its knees. So they had gone to the NRL and they had asked for a loan in order to remain solvent. It's pretty, if the NRL had said no to that, the West Tigers could have gone under financially. It may not exist. I'm sure that there would have been somebody who would have bailed the club out, because nobody would want the club to go under. But it was pretty serious. So that's why they had the conditions. You need at least one woman, and we want an independent chair. So our job was to get to work in taking the club from that financially challenged position to getting it to a point where it could stand on its own 2 feet. And we had to pay back that loan. So that was a loan. It wasn't a gift. And so our job was to really overhaul the club's finances. It meant that we had to go through everything. We had to look at contracts, what we were paying for everything. It didn't affect what we were paying for players, because there's a salary cap, and probably the great thing about that is whether your club is solvent or not. Oh, well, actually, if you're insolvent, you can't trade. But if you're financially challenged or not, there's a minimum amount that you can pay your players, and then there's a maximum amount, and regardless, you have to pay that, right? So the players were protected. They were not part of this cost cutting, but everybody else, everything else was up for grabs. We had to look through the football department. We had to look through the executive team. We had to make some significant changes.
You really had to hit the ground running.
We really did, and it was tough, because there were people that had been around the club for a long time, who were being paid for even a small role or a large role or whatever, and we had to rip the Band-Aid off and make some difficult decisions. Some of those decisions affected legends of the club, and that was really challenging, because that's hard for them. It's hard for then the media hears about those things and goes to town on you and all that sort of thing. But we just really had to make some difficult decisions, because if we didn't, then I don't know what the club would look like today. And my goal, and the other 2 independent directors, was to, our single-minded goal was to get the club to a point of profitability. And I'm really pleased that that's what happened before I stepped off the board. So in many ways, had we not reached that, I probably wouldn't have gone when I did. Because I chose the timing to step away. But I was satisfied that the club was
in a better position.
It was in a really good position financially. And I think now, from what I hear, the club is still in a good position, so that's good. But that's so the thing that you probably don't necessarily look at is, first of all, we don't make the decisions as to who's playing and who's not playing. We don't make selection decisions, and we shouldn't. There are some. I think there are some clubs who the boards do that, but absolutely that's not the role of the board. But the role of the board is to support the organisation and to make sure that the club and the football department have the resources that they need in order to do what you would want us to do, and that is do our best to win on Saturday and Sunday and, on the weekends and Thursday, particularly Thursday night. So yes, that, we make difficult decisions around resourcing. We hire and fire the CEO. That is actually our most important job. And then we just have to provide the right culture as well. And we had to make some decisions around culture, right? We had to, that is something that the board owns. And I do think that I actually felt that the culture of the organisation was in a really good place too when I stepped away. I can't comment on what's happened since because I'm not close enough to it, but the organisation itself was in a very good place.
Amazing.
So the West Tigers, as we know, over the last few years have been a little bit unstable at board level. And obviously, like you said, you don't know what's going on behind closed doors at the moment. But how important is board stability for on-field performance? And what does a strong relationship between a club's board and a football department look like?
So stability is really important. It's important because there's, the board's responsible for culture and strategy. The board's responsible for the CEO. And if the club can be focused on the things that you as fans want them to be focused on, which is, how do we win on the weekend, then, and of course I'm sure you want your club to make sure that if we do win, we're doing it the right way and we know we're culturally we've got good values, then that if you know that that's happening behind the scenes and there's stability in the approach, same people, consistent, then you're not going to be worried about that. You're going to be focused entirely on what happens on the weekend. When there's lots of noise and drama, the players themselves don't know who, they get nervous. Yeah. I think that's the thing. They get nervous. Mm-hmm. They don't know. They know they've got contracts, so they're not worried about that. But they don't know if they're going to have the same coach. They don't know how you're going to respond to
questions at media releases that they don't know anything about. So they're getting hounded in media releases and stuff too.
Yeah, that's right. So I think it's inevitable that there'll be an impact on the playing group if there's instability at the board table. And I'd say that really the relationship between the board and the football department should only be providing the right resources, making sure that the coach and everybody's supported publicly and privately until you absolutely don't support them anymore. Mm-hmm. And there's a reason for that. Mm-hmm. But they shouldn't be wondering. They shouldn't be thinking, God, what will tomorrow bring? How are they going to react tomorrow? Will they support us tomorrow? Will they not support us tomorrow? They should have certainty from their board. And I think, if you look at the really strong clubs, that's what they have. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There is a reason that some of those clubs are very strong.
Like the Roosters.
Exactly. Yeah.
Definitely.
And, we don't like everything that some of those clubs do. But I think having strength and stability and resilience so that nobody has to worry about that. Yeah. And there are no surprises. Yeah. So even if there's a way that people behave and you think, unless it's illegal, but if there's a way that people behave and you go, well, actually I wouldn't like that. But at least you know what it is. Yeah. Right? So, yeah, I hope that there's stability now. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, what happened has now been overturned and people are back in the saddle, and hopefully there'll be some ongoing continuation. So let's just hope for the
because it looks like it's playing off. Like the board, no dramas or going on, and it looks like the boys are feeding off that at the moment.
Well, because the most important thing actually is that there's a coach there, and the board has shown support for that coach, and particularly in his, when he had his training wheels on, and I think now we're all pretty pleased that the training wheels are coming off, right? Yeah. And so you can see the fruit of that. Yeah. But what could happen is if you change that board or you change the leadership in any way, they may have a different view about the coach because they're not invested in the coach. But as fans, you're pretty invested in that coach now, right? Because you're starting to see what he can do.
That's right.
And that's where what a really good board should do is just really provide the resources to support what's happening now and let them get on with it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Amazing. So when you finished up in 2019, Barry stepped in as chairman at the time.
Yes.
And now Barry's back.
Yes.
I've had the opportunity to have a chat with Barry a couple of times, and working with Sean, who is in the interim CEO role. I think the two of them make a really good pairing. We would just really like the interim part of Sean's job title to potentially drop away. But thinking about, what we were just saying, the changes to the board recently, what do you think is the biggest opportunity for the West Tigers in the coming years?
Oh, wow. Well, I think the greatest opportunity is for them to actually continue to win and to make the finals. But yeah, look, I think actually the stability and the consistency is the greatest opportunity. So to be really solid in their and unified. So, one of the problems that clubs often have is that when there's a little bit of instability, people start thinking about their own survival. Mm-hmm. And sport becomes an extension of media. People talk to the media. There's leaking against each other. It's ugly. So I think the greatest opportunity for the West Tigers is to start to grow into a club that resembles one of the strong clubs. They don't leak. They're resilient. They can have a loss, and they don't crumble. Right? They can go, right, we've had a loss. We're going to regroup. We believe in ourselves. So I think that self-belief is the most important change that we hope to see, I think, as fans into the near future and beyond. Because I think it's the one thing that did the club in previously is the lack of self-belief. So, we had times, when Ivan was coaching us for his short period, that was the last time that we'd won 3 in a row, right? And I remember I was there, right? I remember we were so excited about it.
We were all on the bus.
That's right.
On the bus.
But we were all on the bus. But then you lose a game, and then because losses, we had more losses than we had wins in the previous years. People start to panic, and I'm hoping that with this group, and given the fact that they only lost by 1 point to the Premiers, which is unbelievable, right? We should be so proud of them. It doesn't feel like a loss for the first time. It feels like, well, this is okay, that happened.
Yeah,
we still believe, and I hope that continues. I think the fans have always been able to jump back in, but the players themselves and the club has to believe. So I feel like that's the greatest opportunity in the short term.
Okay, lovely.
Okay, so one of the platforms that Kelly and I are trying to do through this podcast is to celebrate all women that are involved in rugby league.
Yes.
From the players to those who might be working in media or sports physio, whatever it might be. So, but rugby league still has relatively few women in senior governance roles. Have you seen this begin to shift in recent years, and what still needs to change?
No, I don't think we have, unfortunately.
I did do some research.
Yeah, I couldn't find anything.
Because Danielle Frizzell, you mentioned her in the pod that you did with Lockie.
Yeah.
At the time you were chair, she was
Yes.
chair at the same time, but now she's no longer chair. But there is I did see that the Papua New Guinea side will have a female CEO, which is
great.
very exciting.
Yes.
Because that's the only one out of 20 teams.
Yeah. So back in the day when I was chair, there were 2 chairs, and there was Raylene Castle.
That's right.
Was
yes,
the
Raylene.
CEO of the Bulldogs. So we had a female there, and Dave Smith had a deputy CEO of the NRL who was a woman, and then and there was a real kind of push from the NRL, and then we all stepped away for various reasons, and there hasn't been a replenishment of women. And I suspect it's because it needs to come from the leadership of the sport. So there has to be a desire there. And it was there when I joined, and I don't know. I can't comment now because I'm not close enough to the sport, but there needs to be a push from there. And I definitely think that the sport is better for having women involved. Our club is better for having women involved. There were not so many women involved when I first became chair. We had a much smaller female fan base as well, definitely a smaller female membership.
Yes.
And now it's bigger, which we worked really hard. But we cared about that, so we made it happen. And that's what I mean about the leadership. So leadership of clubs have to want senior women involved. Leadership of the sport has to want senior women involved. And that is everywhere from the board through to the membership base and the media. The media's actually done the best job of all.
Yeah.
There are some great female voices. I'm particularly proud of, Emma Lawrence being the first female to call an NRL game. Like that's so exciting.
That's really breaking a platform.
It's really breaking the platform. Good old Triple M.
Yeah.
So, all of these things, I think that's really important. There's a bit of way to go, I think, in the sport still, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely agree. But if there were women out there who wanted to move into the senior space or into rugby league in any sort of facet, whether it is from working reception at a club or in the media or finding their way onto a board, do you have any advice for them?
Well, so first of all, I would say absolutely do it. because even though I would always characterise the West Tigers time as the 5 hardest years of my life, they were the 5 also most rewarding. So it's a fantastic thing to do. You just have to let people know that that's what you want to do. So one of the other things I always say to women is if you really want to do something, you have to let people know. It's actually how I became involved in Dolly magazine, because I had a boss. I was working at the Daily Mirror newspaper, and my boss was a woman, and I used to say to her, I just really want to be a magazine editor. And she's the one that heard about the job at Dolly. They did, because, always the best jobs are not advertised. It's the word of mouth. And because I'd told her over and over again relentlessly, I must have bored her stupid, I told her that this is what I wanted to do. She then recommended me. So you have to make sure that you tell people that that's what you'd like to do. So, but I would say go for it, and don't be afraid. And if people, and if you don't feel like you're getting a positive response, and you have to say, well, that's not about me, that's about them. I'm just going to move on to the next person and tell the next person.
Time. Yeah.
It's not the right time, but keep
For
trying.
them. Yep.
Keep trying, because it's the right time for you.
Mm-hmm. Amazing.
Okay, so last question for the interview before we go into some footy chat. So when you reflect on your time with the West Tigers and look ahead to the future of the NRLW and the broader women's game, what gives you the most optimism about where rugby league is heading?
So what gives me the most optimism, and I did my research so that I could actually tell you, because I'm so excited about it. So the women's game, I'm really excited about it. It was seeded, as part of the NRL during my time. I'm not taking credit for it, but when I was involved in the NRL, in obviously West Tigers, was when they started talking about the NRLW, and we had this fantastic Tasha Gale women's team, and Justin Pascoe and I were saying we've got to have a women's team. We were not selected in the first round, but obviously we then managed to push hard and get our female team. But now fast forward to really 2025 grand final, and the 2025 NRLW grand final was the most watched women's rugby league match of all time. It drew an average audience of 1.33 million viewers, which was up 42.5% on the previous year. That is the most exciting thing about the women's game, because we've always known that women are fantastic sports people, and always the resistance was, well, they can't draw a crowd, so therefore there's no money. There's no money coming in if they can't draw a crowd. So it's always been about audience, and I think we've now demonstrated that there is an audience for the NRLW, and an exciting audience. And so therefore there is an argument for sponsorship. There's an argument for money to come into the game. There has to be an argument to pay these women to be able to actually, become at least semi-professional, so that they don't have to not play because of their day jobs, or the bosses won't give them time off to train. Right? These are the challenges that female athletes still face, and particularly NRLW athletes. So I'm excited about the fact that we should be on the cusp of paying women properly to play the game, having an argument for sponsorship, and because Katie Page has done a brilliant job, but she can't be alone. That cannot be the only money that comes in for this sport. So we need more money. We need people to back this sport in the way that Katie admirably has done and was first mover. So we need the money to come in. I'm really excited now. There's a story. So I just think it's all up from here.
Amazing. Thank you. Yeah. Well, Marina, thank you so much for your insight into not only your career, but also the West Tigers and the impact that you had at the Tigers. I sort of when I sort of went back and I was like, hang on, was it really 2019 that you finished up in your formal position at the club? It doesn't feel that long ago, I guess, because we have sort of still seen each other at games and things like that. And even though you're no longer, as you said, on the board, no longer behind the curtain, I guess, at the West Tigers, you still have a vested interest in the club, whether that be through your husband or with Lockie, who you've mentioned is ground announcing tonight, which we're all very excited about. We love when Lockie gets on the mic. We also had the opportunity to chat with Lockie on Saturday night. He came out to the Sherwood and jumped on our podcast panel with our ambush event. So it was great to see him on Saturday night. But now we'd love to get your thoughts. So we hear Lockie's thoughts on the footy all the time on his Playing in Simple podcast, which we love. But we want to hear your thoughts. Yep. So we've only got about 20 minutes before we have to dash out the door to get the three of us to Leichhardt on time as well. Yeah. So we'll move pretty quickly through this. But before we jump into the boys' games, Rach, can you give us a quick update on the Lisa Fiola?
Okay. So last week we spoke about that our Lisa Fiola girls were playing in their semi this weekend against the Central Coast Roosters. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, they went down 14-4. So that ends their season for 2026. But Olivia Large was our only try scorer, but I spoke about her again last week. I think she's up for a big future. But I do want to give a shout out to our halfback who played the game, Charlotte Withers. She's actually going off to America in June to represent the under-17 Australian team in flag football.
Oh, wow.
In the hope of making the Los Angeles Olympics in whatever year they take place. So keen to follow her journey. She sounds like she's got an amazing athletic ability because she's also great at javelin and all these.
Oh, bit of an all-rounder.
Bit of an all-rounder.
Wow.
Amazing. So on Saturday, we were out there. Lockie was out there. Marina, you were not. Were you?
No,
you weren't out there on
we
Saturday.
had a family dinner.
Right. But there were 17,000 of us at Campbelltown on Saturday night, which was an incredible crowd for Campbelltown. So we took on the Broncos. We had played and won against Newcastle the week before, so we were on our illustrious 3 in a row, which we hadn't done since your tenure as chair, which is pretty crazy. We spoke about the Broncos side last week. Yes, they were missing a number of players, but as we said, basically their whole back line was 1-7 from the grand final, apart from Reece Walsh. Adam Reynolds, as we expected, kicked us out of the game, but we kept them tryless in the second half, and they only beat us by 1 point in the end. So the NRL also announced yesterday that the telecast of that game was the second most watched rugby league game on Fox of all time. Yeah, not just this year, but of all time, which is incredible.
Well, that just shows the brand that the West Tigers can be. Like, we have been down the bottom of the ladder for such a significant amount of time. We've always said that if the Tigers start going well, people, this will be driving the sleeping giant. It will continue to drive forward.
Yep.
All right. So let's talk quickly about that game. There's been about 700 podcasts since Saturday night that have spoken about the game. But I'm going to ask each of you. So Marina, I'll ask you for the spark. What was the spark that you took away from that game? So the moment, the player, or the effort that gave you a lift to show you what this team can be?
I thought Terrell May and Alex Twal, I think that combination for me was a spark, and the way that they put in a lot of effort to allow the halves to do their job. Yeah. I think that they're often a spark, that's a regular thing, but it was exciting to watch, I think, last weekend.
Lovely. Rach, did you have?
I had a spark. I actually had the 3 tries that we scored. They all came off absolutely brilliant plays, brilliant passes, brilliant phases. Samuela had a big effort in 2 of those tries. Like, his passing game was unbelievable. Like, best hands in the club, I think they say. So our 3 tries, I think, we just shows what sort of attacking brand of football we can play.
Beautiful. Yeah. My spark was definitely Samuela with that little jinky pass inside to Appy, and then the pass out, the leap, the catch and pass to Tiny. What about the frustration? So, Rach, I'll throw to you first. The play, the decision, or the pattern that had you shaking your head?
The call on Xavier Willison, it was a tackle to me. So we had Arpy around his legs and AD Dewey had his hand on his shoulder. Now, the previous week, Macassini had a try taken off him, or try opportunity taken off him, because the
back of Dom
Young's hand was on his back like this. It didn't get called a try. It didn't get called a tackle, and it led to Karabati. What's the winger?
Kiripani.
Kiripani scoring a try. So I guess it's that inconsistency in refs' calls again, and the interpretation of the rules that leaves fans frustrated.
Yeah. Marina, did you have a frustration?
So the frustration for me, to your point, we kept them scoreless in the second half. We were playing really, really well, going wide when we should have set up for a field goal. That was the frustration. I think everyone, I imagine you were all screaming at the game. We were screaming when we were watching it. you know, yeah, that for me was the frustration. And I know that there would have been a game plan, but you kind of have to adapt in the moment, especially when there's hardly any time left.
That's right, yeah. My frustration was the errors. We probably had the most errors in that game that we've had all year, and potentially that's what essentially led to good field position for the Broncos and things like that. So it's something that I'll be looking for tonight to make sure that we get those little errors out of the game. The last thing, the talking point, the thing everyone should be discussing coming out of this game. I'll throw to you again first, Rach.
Our forwards, as you alluded to, Terrell May, have been absolutely dominated through the middle. And it's laying a really solid platform for our halves and what to do, what they need to do. But I did find a little bit of a statistic because I love my stats. So we're the second best team in the comp to keep the opposition team in their own half. So 63% of the play the balls that the opposition are in their half. So we're actually eliminating post-contact meters. We're hitting hard in defence, like we're physical. So I'm just so incredibly proud of how far our forwards have come, considering over the years it's always been an area of our team that has gone a bit amiss.
Yep. Marina?
And I would say that, you know, I mean, we love them all, right? We love everybody. Yeah. But I think, you know, we've got Madden, Luai and Dewey. And so, you know, what combination
and
of
even
those three? And exactly, and he's fantastic, right? Yes. And you know, as Lockie reminds me, you can't rule him out because when he comes on, he has immediate impact. And he only ever comes on, I think Lockie said, at the 55th minute. So we actually have got a choice, and it'll be really interesting to see how Benji continues to use those, but it's, you know, it's almost an embarrassment of riches.
It is. When was the last time we had depth in our halves? Like if you think back to your tenure, we were
it was a struggle.
Often playing some poor random kid.
Or putting the fullback into the
fullback into the halves, or the hooker into the halves.
It was so frustrating.
Now we've got such a depth there that's it blows my mind. My talking point, I'm not going to go too much into it because it's been everywhere in the media. I probably played into it a little bit too much myself on Saturday night in the heat of the moment. I was one of those fans that sort of lost their cool on Twitter and posted out that I thought Todd Smith lost us the game because of those two shocking calls, the Willison call and then the Appy penalty that allowed them to equal the score on the scoreboard. But yeah, the big talking point for me is just I need to stay off Twitter. Keep posting my piggy. Everyone loves piggy when we score a try, but I think I need to just potentially stay away from it until I've calmed down a little bit. But yeah, today it's now 10-6. Straight after we finish in about 10 minutes, all three of us are going to be heading straight to Leichhardt Oval to watch the boys take on the Raiders. The Raiders are coming off a win, so they did manage to beat Melbourne. We've lost 5 in a row now.
5 in a row.
When was the last time Melbourne lost
14th
5
position
in a row?
Or something, which is crazy, 15.
Yeah. But the Raiders, similar to the Broncos last week, have lost 3 key players. They've lost Josh Papali'i, they've lost Hudson Young, and also as of yesterday, they lost Simi Sasagi. He's been ruled out with a hamstring injury. So Tamale is coming into the starting side to replace Sasagi in the centres, and we're seeing ex-West Tiger Dane Laurie potentially make his debut for the Raiders off the bench. My first question is around selection changes. So, Marina, I'll throw to you first. Benji has opted to not play Makasini this week. He has been seen in a mood boot. Benji has said he's got a bit of bone bruising, so it could be the perfect timing. But he has replaced him with Luke, who has a little bit of rocks and diamonds in his game as well. So what are your thoughts around Benji's selections in that particular spot?
Well, I think it's the right decision to drop our 18-year-old at this moment for all the right reasons. I mean, I would back the coach. So I think I'd start off by saying I support the coach. I think, Benji has proven to us that he is making the right decisions. He's obviously knows his team really well, better than any of us could. I think the challenge will be that when you drop a player, particularly when they're young, what I've seen in my experience is sometimes they lose their confidence. And so it will be there'll be some work in making sure that when he comes back,
that team culture will be there to support him,
and that he feels confident enough to get back and do what we know he can do on the field. So, I would back Benji. I wouldn't second guess that.
Yeah.
And let's hope Benji's right.
No, I'm with you there. Rach, the other big change in the back line is Patrick Herbert has been moved to the extended bench.
Yes.
So he's in jersey 18, I think, tonight, alongside Tristan Hope is in jersey 19, and Stafford Toa is going to be playing his first game of the season. So what are your thoughts around that shift in the centres?
I'm actually really looking forward to seeing how Star goes today. He's been out of the game for quite a long period of time now through various injuries. But when he's on. Like, he's a very, very good centre. So I'm keen to see how he goes, because he's got incredible upper body strength and he can find a try line and power through defence. So I'm extremely keen to see how he goes today. And again, it just shows our enrichment of depth, that we can have Herbert on the bench and bring in Star to help the team out today.
Beautiful. And Rach, what's a key matchup for us to watch in this game?
Buller versus the entire Raiders defence.
Okay. Which is a little bit going to be creamy and fluid.
I just think it is going to be creamy and fluid. Like, I think once
like a warm apple pie.
Like a warm apple pie. I think once our forwards start going forward and start giving us the space that we need, Buller's going to have an amazing game today.
Well, we saw that try
exactly
where he had 3 touches of the ball in the one movement. He passed the ball to Sione.
Yep.
Sione hit the line, got the ball out to Buller.
Yep.
Buller passed it to Dewey.
Yep.
Dewey got through the line.
He's really starting to hit peak form.
Yeah.
And that try, as you just mentioned, I can see a few of those things happening once we get a bit of space and a bit of movement.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah.
A key matchup.
I would say, so without calling out particular names, I'd say forwards. So I think the forwards are going to be, and for all the reasons that you've just outlined, Rach, and I think given that we know that if our halves have space, they can score tries. And obviously the Raiders know that. So they will be working really, really hard, and our forwards have to be on their game.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to sort of seeing Star and Tony and Tiny have amazing games against their the Raiders' edge defence. Their edge defence aren't the strongest. Their edges are good at scoring, but scoring long-range tries. So we've got to make sure we shut them down and don't give them space.
They've got the worst defence.
But their defence, I'm really looking forward to seeing Tiny off the back of Sam and Star off the back of KPP. So hopefully they can get over. What is the importance of the Leichhardt Oval crowd tonight, Marina?
Well, I can tell you it's so important, and I tell you that from experience. So, having been in the shed before and after a game, there is something magical about Leichhardt. I think it's because the fans are so close. It's the closest, I think, of any of the stadia that the Tigers play at. They can hear everything that you say, and when they run, but there's also the history in running down that tunnel. They just get such a kick out of it, I can't tell you. And it is different to anywhere else. So, I'm hoping that they bottle that and they run out with it, but they will be wanting to do the very best for all of us tonight, because 3 of us are going to be there. They'll be wanting to do the very best. And with a full house, it's going to be so exciting.
Yeah. Right.
Leichhardt's just special. I just love going there. Like you said, it's almost indescribable, the place. And, you just go there. You see that hill fill up, like where Kelly and I sit is, behind the players' bench. You see that hill fill up, and it's just an energy that goes around, that reverberates around that ground. And I think the players absolutely feed off that. They know it. They can hear it in the sheds. Yeah. And it's just special. It's just,
well, we've won 4 of our last 5 games at Leichhardt. So we don't have the greatest record, though, against the Raiders. So hopefully we can use that Leichhardt energy to get that up over them tonight. So let's round out with a score prediction from everybody. Rach, I'll throw to you first.
Okay, so my lovely nephew is a massive Raiders supporter. So he's tuning in today. So Chase, I'm sorry, but the Tigers are going to win 30-10.
Wow. The Tigers are obviously going to win, I think, but I think that there'll be a lot of points scored. So I'm thinking it'll be a little bit closer, but 26-16.
26-16. That's still a decent scoreline. I'm happy with that. I hate doing score predictions. I always forget to actually think of 2 numbers so I am going to go Tigers 32-12.
Okay, similar scoreline.
Similar 20-point differential.
Well, I hope you are right. and you know,
We don't want to be nervous sitting there. Let's have a nice, easy,
but
comfortable
also for
win.
and against, right?
That's
So we
it.
need to build up our four.
Yep.
When was the last time we were still in the positives with for and against in round 8?
That's incredible. Because even in the days when I was there and we were thinking we could still make the 8, we were in the negative in
That's
terms
right.
of our
And
against.
And you have to win
And
another
that's-
game
That's it.
because of
It's
that negative.
impossible once you're in the negative, because then it comes down to, oh, well, there's a bunch of you in 9th place, and guess what?
And you
You're
need
in the
so and
negative.
so to lose.
Yeah, and you do
so-
the mathematical chances,
Yeah.
and we need to win by 60 points this weekend. So.
Yes.
I feel good about the team this year. I've got
Oh,
a really
yeah.
good feeling.
It's
so
such a different.
it is a massive
it's-
difference.
We've like I feel like anybody that we talk to. So
Yeah.
Rach and I at the Sherwood last week, we spoke to a lot of Tigers creators. There were so many podcasters and so many creators out there, and everybody is just excited to go to games. We go with it's a very different
It is,
vibe.
yeah.
In the past, you would think, oh, you know,
You
we'll be
turn up-
lucky to
yeah.
go home not getting
You
slaughtered
turn up, you
70
cheer,
nil.
but you're going there like more pensively. You're dragging your feet a little bit more. But
You tell people
Yeah.
you're hopeful and they look at you as if to say, really?
Yeah.
Are you okay?
Are you?
Are you sure? But now you can say, I think we're going to win. And you walk into the ground and you think we're going to
Yeah,
win.
exactly.
Yeah. Go Benji. Good
Go
on
Benji.
him.
Exactly.
yeah, the team culture he's creating is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also look at the fantastic, I look at the 2005 players who are in the coaching team
That's right.
as
I
well.
know.
Right?
Sure.
These people
Yes.
know what success looks like.
Yeah, well, Paddy was
I'll
out
back them.
there with the boys during the
Yeah.
week. So anyway, we should wrap up. It is 5:58. So let's get out to Leichhardt Oval. Thank you again so
Thank you,
much,
Marina.
No,
Marina.
thank you
It
for
has
having
been
me. I'm
so
so-
much fun
Well, you guys are amazing. so-
chatting
Thank you.
footy with you and learning a little bit more. Every time I listen to a podcast or hear you talk, find out a little bit more about your journey, and it's so inspiring. And I hope somebody out there that's thinking of getting into a career such as yours has taken something away from. I don't know how you couldn't. There were so many little gems that you threw out there tonight.
Thank you.
But Rach and I will be back next week with episode 3. We'll be definitely spending a lot of time talking about women's origin next week. So game 1 is next Thursday night. So majority of the show will be
Team selections,
team
any
selections,
controversy.
all those kinds of things. But we'll also be reviewing our massive win against the Raiders tonight and previewing our round 9 game. So again, thank you both for joining
Kelly.
me tonight,
you.
and we'll see you next week. Go the Tigers.
Go the
Go the
Tigers.
Tigers.